Alright, you guys, today we're going to be swapping out the power steering pump. The old one's leaking, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of that one. And got Robert's Customs here.
Hello, how are you today?
Certified Honda technician here. But yeah, is this pretty common on Hondas, Robert?
Yes, sir, it is.
It is? How many power steering pumps did you say you swapped out in the last year?
Just on Honda Odysseys, I would say I've done at least 40.
40?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a big number. It mainly happens with high mileage and stuff?
High mileage, and they also have a recall out on it.
They do? Really?
Yes, they do.
I bet you mine had it. I just never went to go check it out.
Well, it's a possibility that you may have already had the recall done, but over miles and time, it can go out again.
So I bought a brand new one this time, so we should be good then, right?
Should be good, absolutely.
All right.
Here, I'm Robert, owner, operator, and technician with Robert's Customs. Today we're going to show you how to replace the power steering pump on a 2005 Honda Odyssey EXL 3.5 liter iVTEC motor. If you have any questions for me or comments, please comment below the video. I can also be reached at my email address. It's robertscustoms@yahoo.com.
Go ahead and pop the hood. Our reason for the fan is because we're trying to, cool it down a little bit, so that way we're going to deal with the
summer is pretty brutal.
Yeah, Texas summer is just like you said. Yep. But basically, he's going to show us what we're going to be looking at.
All right, what we're going to start out doing is we're going to go ahead and pull this engine cover here. That way we can expose the power steering pump. On the front, you're going to have two screws, one over here by the oil cap, one over here by the oil dipstick. Just take a small screwdriver like I have here, a little pocket screwdriver. You're going to turn that to the left, and this one over here to the left, and it should come right up. All right, now we've exposed the power steering pump. You can see here, you have this power steering line, comes to the top of the power steering pump. You have this power steering hose, comes from the reservoir over here on the side to the side of the power steering pump. We're going to have to remove this from the side of the power steering pump and this hose from the top of the power steering pump, as well as we're going to have to remove the serpentine or the drive belt from the power steering pump pulley so that we can access the actual power steering pump itself. All right, now that we've got the cover off and we've got everything pretty much out of the way, we're going to start by taking the return line hose off and the pressure line hose off. What you're going to need is you're going to need some angled needle nose pliers. This is going to help you get down here to this clamp right here. I'm going to go ahead and clamp that, move it back. And that's pretty much all there is to that. What I'm going to use here is there's two 10mm bolts here. I've got a 10mm socket, and I've got a cordless impact here. Makes it a whole lot easier. If you just have a 3/8 ratchet, that works also. Just slap the socket on there and go at it. Pretty much you're just going to take these out. Again, like I said, the cordless impact makes it a little bit easier. Now what we're going to do, we're going to take a shop rag for the pressure line. This is going to keep you from making a huge mess back here. What we're going to do is we're going to wiggle it a little bit. There's an O-ring that sits down in here. We're going to pull this off. You've got to kind of do it quick so you don't make a mess. Pull it up, kind of wrap the rag around there so that you don't lose a whole lot of power steering fluid when you take that off. Just kind of set it back out of the way. There's a wire back here, a hose, to where you can just set it back behind there. Now we're going to work on the return line. Usually what I do for the return line, since we're just pulling the hose off here, is I take an old spark plug. This is an old spark plug out of a Honda, old NGK. What you're going to do is you're going to pull this hose up you try and do this pretty quick too, so you don't lose a whole lot of power steering fluid also. Pull it up, just put that in there, and it pretty much plugs off the power steering fluid coming out of that hose. Okay, and then you can just bend this back, set it back behind there, that way it's out of your way.
Cool.
The next thing we're going to do here is we're going to take, if you got a 19mm or a 3/4 inch socket, you can just stick it onto a breaker bar, or if you have a ratcheting breaker bar or a 1/2 inch ratchet, just stick it down in here. We're going to take the serpentine belt off now. You've got basically like a little nut that sticks out here, and it's a 19mm. You're just going to stick your socket on there, and you're going to push towards the back of the vehicle.
All right. I see it right there on the left. Get the tool and point to it on the end.
That is correct. It's going to be right at the end of the breaker bar. It's going to be the little nut.
So you pull back on it and it loosens the belt up. That way you can get it off this.
It releases tension on the serpentine belt.
Yep.
So you can pull it off of the power steering pulley, and makes it a whole lot easier. Okay, now that I've got the socket on the nut that sticks out for the tensioner, we're going to push towards the back of the vehicle to release tension to remove the belt. After you release the tension, just pull the belt off. You don't have to pull it off all the way. You can pretty much just leave it on the pulleys it's on. Bend it over to the side. I usually stick it behind one of the coil pack wires. That way it's out of the way. And now we can access the 2 bolts that hold the power steering pump to the actual engine itself, and get this thing off and get the part replaced. Alright, what we have here is we have the brand new power steering pump, genuine Honda part. What we're going to do is, you can see it doesn't come with the brand new pulley, so you actually have to reuse the old pulley. It's fine, I've never had any issues with old pulleys. Only time you would replace a pulley is if you have broken teeth, or something happened to it to where it's oblong or out of round, to where it's causing the belt to shimmy back and forth. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the power steering pump pulley off of the old pump. Once we get the old pump out, we're going to place it onto the new pump, and that's going to allow the serpentine belt to go around. That way it'll drive properly. Alright, what I have here is I have some of the little stoppers right here, so that the fluid, it'll basically plug this up so that no more fluid will leak out. It's basically the same thing that comes on the new pump, but it just helps the fluid not to spill out anymore. What we're going to do now that I've got that plugged off is we're going to go for the 2 bolts in the side of the motor. You have one back here that holds it on, and then you have one hidden back up under here, right under here. That's pretty hard to see, but if you feel around, you can actually feel.
I'll see it on the tip of your finger there.
Yes, sir. They are 12mm bolts, so we're going to take a 12mm socket and a 3/8 ratchet, and we're going to go down in here. We're going to bring that one loose. We're going to go ahead and leave that in while we go for the other one.
So it won't fall out.
Absolutely. The other one is pretty hard to get to, but once you get on there, you'll be all right. Once you get on there, break them both loose. The best way that I've found to do it is to go ahead, take your socket off of your ratchet, and reach up under here. That way you can manually take the bolt out of the bottom. We're going to take the bolt completely out of the bottom first. And we're going to go back for the one back towards the back of the motor. Now then, we've got the bottom bolt out. Put that up there. Now you should be able to manually angle the power steering pump to where you can grab the back bolt with your fingers. And just unscrew it by hand. If it's easier to do what I did with the bottom bolt and just use your socket, then I suggest go ahead and do that. Sometimes the bolt can be a little bit slippery with some of the spilt power steering fluid. Okay, now that we've got all the bolts out, you should be able to angle it, pull it towards the front of the motor, and the old power steering pump is out. What we're going to do next is we're going to take the power steering pump pulley, which is this full piece right here. We're going to use a socket. It should be a 19mm, I believe, right here on the top of it. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and remove the power steering pump pulley. It is a 19mm nut that sits on here. Basically what I'm going to use is I'm going to use my 3/8 cordless impact again. I've got a swivel socket on here. It's a 19mm again, so we're going to stick that on there. Nut comes right off. Best way to get it off is to actually push down on the shaft and wiggle the pulley back and forth, and the pulley comes completely off of the pump. And there's your power steering pulley. Okay, the power steering pulley, I want to go ahead and let you know it is made out of brass. It is a very durable substance. That's pretty much why you see most parts on Hondas that are made out of brass are not going to wear out. Hondas are made very, very well. They are made here in the States. Most of the engine transmission is shipped from overseas and then placed in the vehicle here and assembled. So essentially you have a domestic import vehicle. On the old power steering pump, I'm going to go ahead and show you, it's actually had an internal failure. That's the reason why you're seeing all of this fluid coming out. The most common thing to happen on these is right behind this plastic piece right here is an O-ring, and right inside here where the power steering pressure line goes, there's another O-ring goes there. Those are the most common places for it to leak, but on the back side you can actually see where it's actually leaking out of the power steering pump assembly. Now this car has almost 200,000 miles on it, and this is the second pump that's been on it. The only reason the first one was replaced is because of the power steering recall on this particular vehicle. It is very important. Honda recommends that every 60,000 miles you get your power steering fluid flushed out. That way you get all contaminants out of the pump, the rack and pinion, all the power steering lines. It's very, very imperative that you do this. It helps prevent premature wear on your rack and pinion. Rack and pinion is basically a steering gear. It is a hydraulic piece that basically goes from one wheel to the other. It essentially helps your wheels turn. If that goes out, you will have sluggish steering, you will have a tight steering wheel, almost kind of like the old school vehicles to where there was no power steering at all. Rack and pinion leaking, rack and pinion going out can cause premature wear on your power steering pump, on your power steering lines also. So it is highly, highly recommended that you switch out your fluid every 60,000 miles. That is per Honda recommendation, and hopefully you never have this happen to you. The rack and pinion can run, I believe it's $1,500 just for the part, and that's a genuine Honda part. If you go to a dealership, that's what it's going to cost you. They do not offer any remanufactured rack and pinions as of right now through the dealership. If you go through your aftermarket, O'Reilly's, AutoZone, Napa, they should be able to offer one for you at a much cheaper price. So I would highly recommend going with one of those. I do recommend going with genuine Honda most of the time, but with a part like that, it can get pretty pricey, and essentially by you getting it remanufactured from an aftermarket, you are getting essentially a Honda power steering rack and pinion. Now we're going to go ahead and put the power steering pump pulley onto the new pump. Place it down and it pretty much falls onto it. Place the nut back over, tighten it down by hand. Hammer it down real quick. It's a pretty simple process. With the cordless impact, it is actually a lot easier because you can torque it down a lot better. If you have a 3/8 torque wrench, then I suggest doing that. You can find in the description below, we'll go ahead and put the torque specs for all of these bolts. Now on the new pump, it does come pre-lubricated. It does have some power steering fluid already in there so that it doesn't dry out over time. You can see where it's already pre-lubricated in there. Now we're going to place this down there. We're going to go ahead and bolt it up and get the van going again. We're going to go ahead and slide this down in there. Be careful when you go down in here not to damage this plug right here. This plug can actually break if you put it down in there too rough. I have seen technicians before break those. Now we're going to put both the bolts back in. It's a lot easier if you start the top one first. That way you can actually have something to hold the pump up, so that when you start the bottom one, you don't have a bunch of stuff in your way. Just kind of get it started hand tight there. Now we're going to go underneath for the bottom one. Go ahead and start that one in. Now we're tightening the bolts. I got them hand tight as far as they would go, so now I'm just tightening them down. You don't want to go too far on this because the bolts actually can break off in the head, and if you have that happen, that's pretty unfortunate. The head would have to come off, either that or if you have a tap and die set, that would be about the only way to get it drilled out of the head. On that, you would actually take a chance of stripping out the bolt hole, and you'd have to re-tap and put new threads in.
Sounds expensive.
It is pretty expensive. Depends on what kind of shop you go to. If you go to the dealer, they're gonna charge you an arm and a leg, but they are Honda factory trained professionals. So if that is what you want to do, then I suggest to go to the dealership. If you have an aftermarket mechanic or technician that you trust and is able to do that particular job, then I would recommend going to them. You would probably save a ton of money. Now that we've got it bolted back up, I've got the serpentine belt, or the drive belt, pulled back over. I'm going to start it on the top of the pulley, and as I push back on the tensioner, I'm going to work it over the back of the pulley. And it shouldn't take too much tension to get it on there. That's pretty much all there is to that. We're going to go ahead and pull the breaker bar and the socket off, and we're going to go and put the return line and the pressure line back on, and then we're going to fill it up with fluid, and I'll show you kind of a quick way if you're doing this in your driveway, garage, or in your apartment parking lot. how to properly bleed air out of the system if you don't have any air tools around. Now we're going to go ahead and put the return line and the pressure line back on. Go ahead and pull your spark plug out of the line. You might make a little bit of a mess here, but if you go on pretty quick with it, it's not going to make much of a mess. With the pressure line, we're going to go ahead and pull the rag that was around it. The O-ring I was talking about earlier in the video on the pressure line is this O-ring right here. This O-ring is normally what goes out on these. This one and the one down here inside the little elbow for the return line. So we're going to go ahead and place the pressure line back on. Now I did check the O-ring on the pressure line. The O-ring is still in good shape. Just had a little bit of contamination on it, so that was cleaned off. I have ensured that it does seal properly. We're going to go ahead and take the 2 bolts, place them back into the pressure line. We're going to take the angled needle nose pliers, move the clamp back down as far as you can. Make sure there's probably about an 1/8 inch of rubber still showing. That way you're not clamping onto the plastic, because the clamp can break the plastic. We're going to go ahead and take the 10mm socket and put it back onto the cordless impact. Just a quick hit with the cordless impact will be tight enough. Again, like I said on the description below, we will put the torque specifications for this. I've done quite a few of these power steering pumps, so it's pretty much second nature to me. So I pretty much know how far I can go before I over torque. That's pretty much the power steering pump replacement. What we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and show you how to properly bleed air out of the power steering reservoir or the power steering system also. We're going to go ahead and take genuine Honda power steering fluid. You can pick this up at any dealership. We use locally here in Fort Worth. We use Frank Kent Honda. Just kind of a shout out to my local Honda people. What we're going to do is we're going to top off the power steering fluid in the reservoir until the reservoir is completely full. This ensures that we get as much fluid circulating through the system and as little air as possible whenever we first start up the vehicle. Now that we have the reservoir completely full of fluid, brand new power steering fluid from Honda, we're going to go ahead and start up the vehicle, and we're going to go ahead and keep the camera trained on the reservoir here so you can kind of see what happens when we first start it up. It's going to suck the fluid down, and you're probably going to see some bubbles come up, but that's going to be all of the air that was introduced to the system from taking the return and the pressure line off. It's completely normal. I'll show you here in a few seconds how we're going to go ahead and bleed that air out of the system and get this to where it's not whining anymore. Now that we have the vehicle started, you can see how all the air is coming up as bubbles in the reservoir. The bubbles is basically just the air coming out of the system that was introduced from the power steering return and pressure lines being removed. Air was introduced to the system at that time. What's happening now is through running the vehicle, it's actually going to press or push all of the air out of the system, and it's going to suck all of the power steering fluid down into the system. The easiest way to do it is to go ahead and crank your steering wheel all the way until it's full lock, both directions. That will ensure that the fluid actually gets sucked down through the power steering pump, the rack and pinion, and all the power steering lines. That'll ensure that there's no air bubbles in there. Go ahead and turn the steering wheel to full lock. Full lock is when you turn your steering wheel and it won't turn any further, that's going to be full lock. You're going to turn it and kind of kick it a couple times at full lock. That way it actually sucks all the power steering fluid down in. Then you're going to cut it the other way. Kind of kick it a couple times, and that should be good right there. Normally what I do at this point is, now that I've actually introduced as much power steering fluid as I can to the system through running the vehicle, I will actually turn the steering wheel to full lock. I'll turn the key off and remove it. That way the steering wheel will lock into place. And that right there is basically an old technician's trick that was taught to me of bleeding all the air out of the system. Basically what's happening now is all the air is being pushed out of the system, all of the power steering fluid is being sucked into the system, and it's a little bit easier way to do it if you don't have any air tools. Alright, we're going to go ahead and put the engine cover back on now that we're completed with the power steering pump replacement. Alright, we are now done with the power steering pump replacement. 2005 Honda Odyssey EXL 3.5 liter iVTEC. If you have any questions, post them in the comments, and I'll try and reply back as quick as possible. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.